There we go. So, Kristen, let me start by asking you, when did you know you wanted to become a teacher?
So I think that's actually a hard question to answer. So in elementary school, it's something that I was really interested in. I was that kid that kind of wanted to help the first grade teacher, like at recess, hand out papers, all of that. So it was something that was definitely on my mind when I was younger. And then as I kind of got older, I think my aspirations kind of like went elsewhere. So by the time I was in high school, I thought I wanted to go to school for architecture. And that's actually like what I did initially. I did go to school for architecture. But then something kind of changed while I was in college, and I wasn't 100% sure what it meant or what I thought I was going to do afterwards. But it kind of just sort of happened. I ended up volunteering at a parish working with high school youth, and kind of wanted a path forward from there. So I kind of developed a passion for working with teenagers, high school kids specifically. And then kind of that led me kind of to a more traditional classroom after kind of like non-traditional educational spaces at the parish.
Well, how how would you describe your teaching philosophy?
So I certainly believe in whole child education. So I think my job, I often teach math, but I think my job is far greater than like the teaching of the math. I think it's making sure students know how to learn, making sure students know that like they are worthy of kind of the effort to put in, that they're not like the sum of their test scores or their grades in school. Like that is certainly a measure of something, but that is not the end all be all. But for me, it's kind of a passion, like developing a passion for learning in my students.
How do you do that? Because you're in a pretty competitive high school, a girls' high school, where girls can be competitive with grades and really just want to know the answers, to get good test grades. So how do you combat that?
So I am pretty transparent in kind of what I want. So I kind of tell them that like a grade is a grade. Like you're not going to remember this grade that you got on this quiz. I talk a lot about I use history usually as the example because for me that's probably what it was. I would study for a history test. I'd study the dates, study the names, study the progression of events, and then you'd ask me a week or two later about like what we were learning, and I would kind of be like, yeah, I don't quite have a lot of things to say about that. So, I think it's understanding that it's process, and that those skills are transferable. With teaching math, there's a lot of like problem solving, like breaking things down. I'd like to think that we use like mathematical type thinking in a lot of different aspects of our lives, especially as adults. Um, so I think it's kind of telling them and telling them over and over and over again. And when they make a big deal about the grades, talking about it. So I think it's just kind of putting it into perspective for them. Some of them buy in, some of them don't. But for me, that's one thing that I definitely do.
I think it's interesting because a lot of times kids will say, why am I learning geometry? And I think your point about the thinking and the problem solving, and those are lessons for life,
Yes.
where solving the problem or knowing pi r squared, even though pi r squared helped me greatly in an advertising promotion, those are not the important things. It's the learning skills.
Yes, and even, something as simple as being able to go back and review your work and kind of find the error, like that, process of, editing or communicating to others, like your thought process when someone doesn't understand. So I think there's a lot in between the lines there.
Now, on that, how do you define success for both you and your students? You talked about that grades are not the end all be all, which I agree 100%, but sometimes students think they are. How do you define success for your students and for yourself?
So I think, for me, like this is entwined in a bunch of different things, but for me, I think one piece of the success is at the end of the class, do students feel differently than they did at the beginning? So I don't pretend that like every student is going to love sitting in math class. My hope is after a year together that they feel differently about it. Either they feel more capable, either they feel more confident, whether they feel like they've actually gained content skills. But for me, I think it's just that there is something different, and it's not something that I purely measure. It's something that I would learn through conversations with these students. They would kind of tell me more about the experience than the like report card would.
You know, you're teaching an all-girls school, and people have this stereotype, which I think is wrong, but it is, that girls are not good in math. Do you have to combat that at all?
I actually think it's sort of easy, because it's our entire population. I don't really feel like it's something that we need to do because of gender. I do think there is this separate thing where I'm a math person or not, but I don't feel like that is necessarily tied to the fact that they're girls. It's kind of this like binary subject. It's either I like it or I don't like it. I'm good at it or I'm not. So I think that's where like some growth mindset philosophy like can kind of come in. So it's like, okay, I'm not good at it yet because you don't have the skills, or perhaps it's an unpleasant subject because it requires previous knowledge, and maybe you didn't have the strongest experience there. So it's something you're going to have to work at and figure out. But I don't necessarily feel like it's because they're girls.
Okay. That probably happens more in a male-female
Yes.
environment.
I hands down think like it's one of the advantages of a single sex
Yeah.
education for girls.
Even
Yes.
though I would probably say in every aspect of school, women are better than men. But how do you build relationships and trust with your students?
So I think that's also like knowing the kid. I don't think it looks the same like across the board. So I think one of the easiest ways that you can do it is in those spaces, that connective space with class. I always have students fill out an information sheet like that first week of school. So I kind of know the things that they're interested in. One of the things I love asking on that is, what do you want Miss Krebel to know? And I think it's fascinating because kids will tell you everything under the sun when you ask such an open-ended question. Like some will say, like, I tell me a story about a previous teacher. Some will tell me something about like a social dynamic between students in the class that I might need to be aware of. Some will say, like, I don't see really well. Some will say, like, it's hard when I have class at the end of the day. So I find like getting to know students through that connective tissue. So whether it's something as formal as tell me about yourself, or just asking them questions as they're coming into the room and not kind of rushing to start class, certainly making the most of my time together for learning, but in those spaces in between, engaging with them as people.
I think students who have you say that every class is an event. How do you make every class an event?
So I believe in fake it till you make it sometimes. So I will put on my best exciting face for everything that I teach. I'm not necessarily as excited to teach every class or every topic even. But I think if you sell it as something fun, something you're excited for them to get, that can be really helpful. It really helps with the buy-in. I do kind of always make sure I film my time. I'm using every last second of my 40-minute class, and might even go into minute 41 sometimes. But I do think it is just kind of making sure like I'm exuding excitement for them and for the learning process.
Do you think the fact that you teach like bell to bell, minute to minute, is that like, does that intensity, do you think, carry on over to get buy-in and to get more out of your students?
It's a good question. I do think sometimes like I could be a little one note on that. I think sometimes some downtime in class could be of benefit. I always kind of feel like I have so much content to get through, and I want to make the most of it. Um, so I do think though that like that ability, like it shows an importance of sorts, right? Like, we're not just here to pass time, like we're here to do stuff. And so I do think that that helps with like an engagement level. I think sometimes, kids will say that, man, I can't believe like class is over already. And other times I'm sure some of them are like, oh my goodness, like I'm just hanging on. I do tend to teach more of our higher end students, so like they can kind of hang a little bit better. I don't know if my teaching style would be exactly the same in all kind of classrooms, but that is kind of what I think about the intensity level.
Okay. It sounds like you have a lot, very high expectations for your students. Um, how do you go about getting them to meet because look, they're teenagers and they want to do the least possible to get the best grade. I mean,
Uh-huh.
that's their game. How do
Yeah.
you get them to meet your high expectations?
So I do think this is actually a question that is a little bit tied to gender. So girls tend to be pleasers. So just in general, inherently, I think like they want to please their teacher. So I think by giving praise like when they do it, and not empty praise, but like encouragement. I can think specifically like when I have students that struggle a little bit more with like executive functioning or kind of like dealing with the details. I have a student in mind in particular who wasn't so great at completing her homework, was a very capable math student. So in all honesty, sitting in class was almost like enough for her. But like I do think there is that discipline lesson to be had with the practice, because while she was okay in my class, I do know at some point like the math gets harder and she will need to figure out the like study skills associated. But I think it's not, recognizing that she has limitations, and instead of constantly being like, you should have, sort of changing it, like, what can I do to help you? And it got to the point where like she was maybe doing her homework at her lunchtime. We had class in the afternoon, which is totally fine. But she would be so proud when I would walk by and like she was working on her math homework. And so I think it's giving her the high fives in those moments. It's like the encouraging and recognizing she is doing her best, and what that looks like for her is different than the next students. And some of the students have no trouble kind of going through the motions and making sure they do their homework and having the system and the checklist. But really those students that might struggle with like the mechanics of school a little bit, and kind of being cheerleaders for them instead of just, looking at the shortcomings.
I think that's a great point. I think on a whole, I'd say a weakness of mine and a weakness of teachers is noticing improvement and noticing hard work on good people who might not be getting the results of someone else. There are plenty of people who get A's who are just built for school and cruise through it.
Mhm.
And they seem to reap a lot of praise. And sometimes it's great to hear you say that because that's what really is the enjoyable, right? Getting kids who don't think they could get it done to get it done. And,
Yes.
and I think that's an excellent point. How do you keep yourself motivated? You said, you fake it, but I mean, still, you got to be motivated in a sense to even do that. How do you keep yourself motivated on a day-to-day basis?
I mean, honestly, it's like thinking about and wanting the best for my students, like not wanting to let them down. Like every day does look different. And I do think I found like a teaching identity that like works and fits me personally. So I think that that's like part of the trick of it. I think it's always kind of seeing what's out there, what other people are doing, and kind of how you might adopt it. I'm somebody who doesn't like I believe in like a pretty traditional like teaching model. However, I do think like there are lots of aspects of new strategies that can be really helpful. So like for me, my first couple years teaching, I didn't do a whole lot of group work or talking in class to one another. And that's something that I changed about like 6 years ago. And it's like when I hear students reflect on their classroom experience with me, it's one of the things that they talk about most frequently. So I think it's like finding things that like actually work. And obviously you can't change what you're doing in the classroom constantly, but even if that means like trying something for a quarter and kind of seeing like what the results are, how it lands with the students, all of that. It's like trying new things occasionally, but making sure those new things are sustainable and still like fit within your own style.
I know you're doing a totally new experience this year,
Yes.
but is there anything are you actually still teaching a class?
I am. I'm still teaching two classes. Instead of teaching math, I'm now teaching religion.
Okay. Is there anything different in the way you're teaching religion? Anything new, not in the content, but in the way you're
Mhm.
delivering it this year compared to years past?
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest. I think I'm still finding my identity, like teaching something so different. It's interesting because oftentimes when you put a math problem on the board, you can kind of get like student guidance and steps, like even if it's something new, there's something familiar there. But with teaching religion, we have students of different faith backgrounds, and so they're not all coming to the table with like any previous knowledge. So I think for me, it's like I'm still working on figuring out what that looks like. I've not let go of like working in groups and kind of talking to one another. I think that helps classroom conversations so much. Students, I think, it feels very risky for students to speak in front of a class, especially if they don't know if they know the answer. But if they have the opportunity to talk it through, like with their seat neighbors, nothing long or elaborate first, I find that I get far more classroom participation from a wider range of students. So for me, like that is something that definitely has been the same. The delivering of content information, that is what I'm still, I think, figuring out, like trying different things and seeing what sticks.
Are you enjoying the change?
I am enjoying the change. It's interesting. Probably my favorite parts of my job probably are outside of the classroom. I'm still excited about teaching those classes because I think there's something special about spending that repeated 40 minutes so often with students. You build something over the course of the year. So I'm still very grateful kind of for that experience. But I think the my favorite parts of my new role kind of fall outside of the classroom and more fall into like community experience.
How do you or do you use technology to in teaching? Like, well, I'll ask that, and then I'll ask you how you work with AI and like Chat GPT and all that. Go.
Okay. So for technology, I as a math teacher loved OneNote. I loved it. Not some I didn't use, I used classroom notebook. So like each student had their own notebook, but I really liked it more for the content delivery. So we have pretty fancy styluses. So I was able to write right on my computer screen. So like when we have students who are competitive athletes and who are missing like a couple of classes, they were able to print the note sheets at home. They were able to see my writing on the board. I kind of have a system where I circle problems that they're kind of doing like they didn't do with me. So if a student's absent, they know like any problem number that was circled like in our notes was a problem that you kind of did on your own. So they can almost like it's not a recreation of the exact classroom experience, but they can kind of follow along so easily. And it was not something where I had to upload or post anything. Students really just had that live access to. Um, they did have their individual notebooks. During COVID, I had them kind of create like portfolios of notes and tests. I didn't really do that so much in the years that followed, but I did use it for homework help. So like if a student had a question about a homework problem, we could kind of go into their notebook. I could kind of post videos, I could post audio, I could post just writing like photos. It was just a really easy communication tool, I think, of learning. So that is one of the things that I used in the math classroom. I also think programs like IXL have like their place. So IXL is like a mastery driven program. It's frustrating for students on how it gets scored. But again, I'm a transparent person, so I actually would tell students and explain to students how the scoring in IXL worked, and then all of a sudden you get far greater like buy-in on their part because they understand the why behind this frustrating. When I get one right, it goes up like 3 points, and when I get it wrong, it goes down 15 points, and how it changes more when you're closer to the higher SMART score versus the earlier SMART score. So I do think though, technology should be used in moderation personally. I think so it's so much more powerful when you're doing things on paper and with each other and live and kind of creating and manipulating things. But I do think that instant feedback of programs like IXL certainly have their place to help aid in like the learning process. As far as in the religion classroom, I'm still figuring out exactly what technologies I like. I'm not using OneNote the same way because I'm not creating notes the same way for my students. So I do still use note sheets with them. I think it's a helpful scaffold for freshmen, which is the grade level that I'm teaching this year. But I do think like the windows into the world is very different there. So it's like we are able to kind of go explore topics, explore videos, like students can kind of have some choice in how they look at things. But I do still think I am mostly device free in class unless it's an intentional choice. My students aren't taking notes on their laptops, they're taking notes on paper, and I find they're far more engaged with me when they're not hiding behind a screen.
Yeah, I do the same thing. I don't think, I don't know, a computer might come out once all year at the most in school. Um, you work at a school with uniforms.
Yes.
What's your take on uniforms?
I think they can be helpful. I think they help students worry a little less about something, right? Whether that's the clothes they wear, how they look. I don't think it eliminates those things, but I do think it kind of levels the playing field on in some regard there. I also believe it teaches expectations. So in adulthood, like there's going to be different expectations. Whenever students are complaining about, like the sock policy, the fact that they have to be all white, I'll ask the question like, who wants to go into a medical field? Do you know that at some point, like it may be dictated to you how long your fingernails can be? And that's for patient safety and cleanliness and all. So, I try and explain to them that some of the rules are not necessarily about like, we don't think the logos on your socks are preventing you from learning or make you look bad or any of that, but it's we've set out a clear expectation, and can you choose to meet that on a daily basis?
I think that's good. I think we a lot of times we're very good at the whats and very bad at the whys.
Mm-hmm.
So like we tell the students the what is you got to wear a dress code. In my school, it's a shirt and tie. But we don't tell them why.
Mm-hmm.
And so they get into that. Well, in college, no one wears a shirt and tie and they learn, but it is the following the expectations. And no matter what you do, even if you work for yourself, there are certain rules you do have to follow.
Yes.
What advice would you give a first or a second year teacher?
Well, that's a good one. You are in like the hardest phase of this, is kind of what I would say. Like I definitely know, probably year 3 or 4 for me is when things started to get a little bit easier. I started to figure out like what worked for me. I think it's important that you don't, like you can get ideas from other people, like what is working for another teacher, and kind of take those and try them on for size. But I think like the best teachers push themselves to do new things, but also find those things that come natural to them. So I do think like when you're authentic and when you're real and when it's comfortable, regardless of what that looks like, that's probably providing like the best learning environment for students in some way.
It's funny, teacher I've talked to said things get easier, and I keep waiting for that day because they don't seem to be getting easier for me. What's something about teaching you wish more people understood?
I think how constant it is and how many different things kind of run through your head in any given moment. I keep coming back to the fact that I'm this transparent person. So sometimes in the class, like I will lose my train of thought because like I'm watching Susie Q over here, like being off task, and I'm trying to do this problem, and I'm thinking, oh, like I don't think so and so's with me. And so it's just that constantness of like how many things are actually like running through your head as you're there delivering content. Sometimes it can be overwhelming. That's not a normal experience for me. I kind of am pretty good at doing all the things at once at this point, but I do think, especially early on, you kind of have to like focus. Like it's like you're focused on delivering the content and you might be missing some of what's going on in the classroom. Or if you're paying attention to what's going on in the classroom, like you might have to like pull back on like what you're doing at that moment, like yourself. So I don't know if that makes sense, but that's kind of like what I think about.
Yeah, you're making 1,000 decisions a day,
Yes.
and I always say that I think it's easy to be a mediocre teacher because you could really skate pretty easily,
Hmm.
but impossible almost to be a great teacher. Like that effort is so insane. And yeah, I wish people realized how hard it would be. Is like in closing, is there anything you'd like, any points or something you would like to make sure that other people understood about the way you teach or anything about the field of education?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting, especially we didn't really talk about AI too much. I'm somebody who will lean into something new and like learn about it and kind of then decide if it has a place or not. I think it's scary. I think it's important that we expose kids to the scary things sometimes. I don't think we're going to get it right all the time. But then I think we also have to be willing to say, like, okay, like this has this like certain place like in our communities, in our school communities. And it does have value, but we have to make sure that we are making good informed choices, that it's not replacing that process. The same way, like I kind of choose to not let students take notes on their device, because I think it captures a level of engagement. I certainly think that the possibilities with AI are very awesome. But I have personal reservation, and I think it's because I'm still new to it, right? Like I think with some time and with some experience and with some training, hopefully we figure out kind of where to harness the power of it.
Yeah, I think if it's used right, it's a personal tutor.
Yes.
If it's used wrong, it's a shortcut to get the answers.
Yes.
And that's the balance. Like like even today, uh, I have kids evaluate every class, and kids said more practice problems. And I said, okay, go home, plug into AI, Inelastic. Um, I'd like 10 multiple choice questions. And they'll produce it. And then you could say, what are the answers? And they'll produce it. And then you could say, I don't understand question 7. And they'll explain it. And so it is like a personal computer, a personal tutor, if you use it that way. However, if you give them a worksheet or I give them a worksheet and they go
Hmm.
home and they just plug in the answers, and I think as teachers, we're going to have to make sure that kids could explain answers and not just get answers, you know?
Yes.
And like one of the things I'm trying to do with homework now is randomly spin dice. And if the dice lands on your seat, you got to come up and explain the homework. So
Hmm.
the kids like, I think, the randomness of it. And when you come up here, no one likes to look like an idiot in front of the class, so you got to kind of know it. So I'm trying to do the battle there with AI and homework on that end. Anything else you'd like to talk about?
Um, I think I'm mostly good. Like I hope I hope people who get into education kind of stick with it. It is not always easy. I think it's because it's not easy, people sometimes don't kind of find their groove in it, and or even understand that perhaps it's just not the right fit at the right school even. So you know, I ironically did not go to college to become a teacher. My college roommate was in college to become a teacher. She is not a teacher, and I'm a teacher now. So I'm just kind of reminded sometimes, and I often think for her it was the experience she had with student teaching in that particular school. I do think she had a passion for it. I do think she was good at it. But I don't think it was like the right community that fit like her skill set. So I don't know. I just hope people kind of stick with it.
Yeah, I agree with you in that sometimes you could be in the wrong school. And on the other hand, you could be like not really into teaching, but get into the right place, have the right
Yes.
mentor and carry you through. Um, there's probably, to me, nothing more rewarding than watching students that haven't succeeded succeed. You know,
Yes.
like that, and like we're never going to get paid a lot. That's just not the profession. But I don't think anything beats that. You know, that feeling of, you know, watching students, you know, go beyond their belief in themselves and then walk away with the confidence, you know, for other things. Well, I thank you for your time.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yes, and it'll be appreciated. And of course, I will send it out and you could share with whoever you want. And
Sounds good.
all right, take care. Thank
Thanks,
you.
Bill.